first of all, I would like to thank FAUBAI for giving me and the International Association of the Universities this opportunity of expressing in a new format, the new normal in these times of COVID-19 disruption, some consideration on the disruption that COVID-19 has brought on higher education community, and more specifically on the international education community. At the International Association of Universities, we have started monitoring the impact of COVID-19 since the beginning of the crisis, and we are deeply engaged in providing information to the higher education community worldwide, and also collecting the information that higher education institutions are providing in order to share both challenges and opportunities and best practices that are implemented around the world. Following this line, we decided to implement a global survey on the impact of COVID-19 on higher education. This survey was an online survey which was open between March and April, and which collected a little bit more than 400 unique replies from higher education institutions in 111 countries and territories. The global survey touched upon all the important mission of higher education institutions: teaching and learning, research, and service to society. And we can see from the survey that the majority of institutions in the world were impacted by COVID-19. And the major impact was the closure of campuses. This closure of campuses happened in an uneven way around the world, and interestingly enough, was not correlated with the spread of the disease. In fact, Africa is the country where the majority of higher education institutions have closed their campuses, despite being, at the moment of the survey, the region of the world less touched by the pandemic. This probably means that the governments in Africa and also higher education institutions themselves took some preemptive measures in order to avoid the spread of the disease. What is coming out interesting from the survey is also the fact that higher education institutions have infrastructure in place to communicate with their students and staff during the closure period. But this does not mean that solves every challenge, because having infrastructure in place does not mean that a communication strategy has been adopted and then an effective communication is existing. COVID-19, for the respondent of the survey, has also brought an impact that will be felt in the future. And especially as the theme of this talk is about what the future of international education will be, one major concern for higher education institution is what will be the future for the enrollment numbers, and especially the enrollment numbers of international students. We saw immediately that one of the impact of COVID-19 was to stop all physical mobility. At the beginning was only from some countries, and then when the epidemic moved from one country to another, there was a complete stop in travel and attraction of international students exchange. And the big question for higher education institution, what will happen in next semester? What will happen for next years? Will the internationalization of higher education in the form of mobility of students and staff continue existing? Will we have a decrease in numbers? Will we ever assist to a return to the world as before? These questions are complicated, and we don't know an exact answer at the moment, because we don't know how long the pandemic will stay in place, what will be the evolution, if a vaccine will be found. But what we can know is that even if this is bringing up challenging to the way internationalization is known until now, it might bring up also opportunities. We know for all the people that are working in internationalization of higher education that there are many challenges of internationalization, and one of them is the fact that it has been considered as elitist and serving a very small part of the student population. This pandemic can bring up, can force in a way higher education institution to look at different ways of mobility, like virtual mobility, and that could be a push to have a more equal opportunities for everybody, also for the students who were not able to move around. Saying that, it doesn't mean that physical mobility will disappear in the future, or that that would be a positive consequence of the pandemic. In fact, the importance of moving in another country, in another education institution, looking at different culture, experiencing a different culture will remain an important asset. But what I would like to say is that maybe this epidemics is bringing an opportunity to look also more at areas of internationalization as virtual mobility, for instance, but also internationalization of the curriculum, internationalization at home, which were sometimes overlooked because of the over-focus on student mobility. Moving on partnership, we see a very interesting result that coming out from the survey. And in fact, the partnership have been affected for the institution responding to the survey, but we have almost two groups composed by equal number of higher education institutions. Some of them are saying that the pandemic has weakened the partnership, whereas the other group is saying that pandemic has strengthened or even created new opportunities for partnership. This data, it's very interesting because it can be interpreted in two ways. The first one, we can see that there is a growing challenge of increasing inequality between higher education institutions. We see it between regions in the world, but we see it also for higher education institutions inside a specific region. This could be looking at the negative side of the pandemic. So we have a risk that existing inequality will become even bigger in the near future. But on the other hand, we see that this pandemic can bring an opportunity, in fact, can push higher education institutions to experiment new ways of collaborating, new ways of creating partnership, new ways of teaching, new ways of conducting research at distance, because all the activities of higher education institutions have been impacted. So really, the present moment of COVID-19, it's kind of creating a turning point which could go either on a positive way or on a negative way. It will depend on the higher education community, how it will be able to respond to this crisis, but not only alone, but also in collaboration with all other important actors of society, as governments, as the civil society. And in fact, another interesting result that's coming out from our survey, and probably the most positive one, is that this crisis has brought back a trust from governments and from society towards the higher education community. We saw that almost 2/3 of higher education institutions that responded to our survey have been consulted by their own governments for expertise, being expertise of researchers working on COVID-19, but also expertise of higher education institution leaders as major stakeholders in public policy. So, to summarize, the main result of our survey are depicting both positive and negative consequences of the epidemics. On the negative side, we have a risk of moving towards a very fractured world, inward looking, where each country, each region, even each higher education institution is only thinking about itself, is closing down, is losing trust, is losing faith on collaboration. And on the other side, we are seeing instead a positive reaction where we see this pandemic as a pandemic, so as a global problem, which can be solved only through a global solution, as a call for more partnership, for more collaboration, for more openness, for creativity, for invention of new solutions. And we also see a rebirth of trust in science, in fact-based evidence, which is fortunately contrasting with the recent shift towards fake news, mistrust in experts. So to summarize and to conclude, I would say that for the global higher education community, and especially for the international higher education community, the COVID-19 pandemic, even if it has caused major disruption, and even if it has caused a big damage, immediate damage to internationalization of higher education, can be transformed to a positive opportunity in the future. But for this, we need more collaboration. We need more collaboration not only between countries and regions, not only between higher education institutions themselves inside a country, inside a region, but also between higher education institutions, governments, and the civil society. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and I hope to be able to express the feeling of the global higher education community and the International Association of Universities towards this pandemic. Thank you very much.